Okay, and we are live. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to today's Guest Talks webinar. For those of you who aren't familiar with guests, we are the Middle East's leading education exhibition and conference. You can find out more about both of our editions taking place in Dubai and in Saudi if you click the pop up on your screens that should be showing up just about now. So in this webinar today, we're going to be tackling an extremely critical topic for today's educators. With artificial intelligence and immersive technologies becoming an integral part of our classrooms, it has become even more important for schools to learn how to balance innovation with children's development. And today's webinar is going to dive deep into all of that, into how to design safe, cognition-first, immersive learning environments for students across all age groups. We do have a Q&A feature if you'd like to submit any questions for our panelists at any point during the webinar today. We'll be keeping those questions for the end and addressing them towards the end of the session. And without any further ado, let me hand you over to our amazing moderator for today, Joseph South, to introduce himself, the topic at hand, and our amazing panelists. Over to you, Joseph.
All right, well, good day. I know that we have people coming in from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Joseph South. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at the International Society for Transforming Education. And it is a pleasure to chair this conversation with such an accomplished group of educators joining us from across the UAE, Shanghai, and Australia. Before I introduce the topic, I want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves briefly. Richard, would you mind kicking us off?
I'm Richard Bishop. I've just my bio is slightly different to what it was as of Monday. So I've been the assistant head teacher and designated safeguarding lead at Sunmark School, and I've been leading on AI. But as of Monday, I have a new role where I am going to be a curriculum specialist for Day of AI, implementing curriculum for responsible and ethical AI use.
Well, I don't think you could have a more relevant new position. So congratulations, and let's move on to Damir.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm Damir, Head of Music and ICT and Digital Integration at Shanghai United International School. And I'm also the creator of the Lesson Intelligence Framework, a lesson design system focused on keeping student thinking central as AI enters the classroom. I also sit on BET Asia Advisory Board. I do a lot of public speaking, workshop, presentations, and I do a lot of reading and learning and researching, learning science, and combined with AI in education. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Damir. Shah.
Thank you, Joseph. Good evening, everyone from Sydney, Australia. My name is Shah Akhtar. I'm a professor of analytics, algorithmic biases, and AI at the University of Wollongong, Australia. And I'm also the Deputy Dean of Research of the Faculty of Arts, Society, and Business. That's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jazz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Joseph. I'm Jazz Sekhan, and I studied in the University of Toronto in Canada. I've been teaching for about 20 years now, and my main priority is to influence more digital literacy. I am the AI lead of innovation, and as well as an English MYP teacher as well.
All right, and finally, Alex.
Hey there, morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. My name is Alex Gray. As of this year, I'm transitioning to be the Digital Innovation and AI Lead at Arcadia. But I've obviously had a working background in AI and interest in that through running a podcast called The International Classroom and my own platform called the Deep Education Network, exploring all things related to AI, pedagogy, teaching, education as a whole, and how these things encompass.
Great, thank you, Alex. And at ISTE, we've we've reached more than 1 million educators with our AI and education initiatives. And I also had the pleasure of being one of the experts on developing OECD's new AI literacy framework, which I'd encourage you to take a look at if you haven't had a chance to see it yet. So to introduce the topic today, I just want to set the stage. If AI is really no longer arriving in our classrooms, it's already here. So the question in front of us has really shifted. It's not whether our students will use these tools, but how we bring them in without quietly eroding the very capacities that school exists to build. Things like reasoning, writing, attention, executive function, and really the ability to stay with a hard problem long enough to actually work through it. One distinction that I find helpful to think about in these situations is two kinds of struggle. There's what I think of as unproductive struggle, and that's the friction that comes from missing background knowledge or unclear instructions or barriers that have nothing to do with the real intellectual work. It's also some of the busy work that we tend to assign in schools. AI can be genuinely liberating there. It can clear the runway so that every learner reaches the actual thinking that they need to do. And then there's productive struggle, and that's the cognitive effort that is the learning. Our shared challenge is making sure AI acts as a thinking partner inside that productive struggle rather than a substitute for it, and that we keep returning agency back to the learner so they remain the ones defining the problems, weighing the evidence, deciding what's worth keeping, while also leveraging the power of AI to do their work more efficiently and in ways that were maybe impossible before. That is easy to say, very difficult to implement, and it looks very different whether the young person is 6 years old or 16-year-old. So over the next hour, I'd like to move through three themes together. What are we protecting? What do we need to protect? How do we design learning for it? And how do we deploy these tools safely and also at scale? So before we get into some of the areas of concern, I just want to take a moment and open it up to the panel to ask, what is the upside of AI? Because of course we could all just ban AI in our schools and eliminate this problem from day one, at least in theory. So where would you say that AI is making a genuinely better, deeper learning experience for students? And I'll open that up to anyone who would love to respond.
Thanks, Rich. Obviously, you talked about the deeper, richer learning experience for students. I think one of the things it offers, and we'll probably dive into this as we go through the conversation as well, is the kind of thing when we started getting to teaching was how can you be all things to all people? And that was a really tricky thing for us. And obviously, we've heard these phrases, terms, you're going to hear about personalization to some extent. And I'm not a massive fan of that. I much prefer the term customization. And I think good teachers who are using this are going to be able to customize the experience for students. And I think that is probably one of the key things from my side anyway, and being able to offer and be all things to all people is to customize the experience for them by using AI.
Thank you. Richard, are you trying to chime in there too?
Yeah, and it kind of builds on what Alex is saying, really. Couldn't agree more. It's the personalization for me that's done it. Being able to put IEPs into lesson planning to personalize those for the people with, particular needs that need addressing in a lesson, but also with the feedback. So like if I've got a class of 24 assessments, I'm able to then give a reactive task for all 24 by putting the feedback into, say, a ChatGPT customized thing, and give 24 sets of 24 different tasks. Of course, there's no way I could possibly do that. So the scale, and as Alex says, it's that personalization, being all things to all people, has been like immense for us.
So clearly, customization, the ability to provide individual feedback in greater depth. Any other advantages to this technology for learning?
I think it's a great research partner. It helps in brainstorming. It helps in creating new products. For example, if I teach my students how to create an app, I basically give them prompt and ask them, develop 20 different apps on 20 different ideas. Back in old days, it was not possible. Now it is possible within a 30 minutes tutorial to develop an app, interact with that app. So that sort of creation is a huge upside of this generative AI platform, what we are saying. Research-wise, brilliant. It does a lot of literature review. what has been happening in this particular field since the beginning of time. So it gives, there are a lot, there, it has to take with caution. I'll talk about that later, but it gives that sort of literature review type of advantages. It's a great writing assistant. There is no doubt about that. It helps in fixing errors, finding citations which are problematic. So it has got huge benefits. And again, we have to use it responsibly. And that's why the whole focus is responsible use of this AI.
Great. Well, so why don't we switch over then to some of the areas where we need to consider its responsible use. And I'd love to start with Jazz. I know writing is an area of focus for you, and it's perhaps one where the temptation to offload our cognitive effort is really strong. It's one that we've heard lots of instructors be concerned about students just running the whole essay through AI. So in your teaching, I'm curious, where in the writing process do you lean in to protect the productive struggle, and where are you comfortable letting AI support the learners?
Thank you, Joseph. I want to go back to Shiray's discussion, about using AI as a catalyst. I think that when Wikipedia first came out, that was way back, I know, but we use it as a catalyst. It was a wonderful thing. However, in terms of AI today, I think that we could use it as a design down, like what is our end product? So what I use it as is, the students know how to prompt. They can find a prompt even. They know exactly how to prompt it. They're very intelligent in terms of that. However, what they need to be doing is understanding how we can use AI to foster their critical thinking. And I use it to kind of change perspectives. So we look at something, they don't have their laptops open, we analyze it, we read it, we answer questions, we brainstorm, do all that. But then now we use AI to look at it from different perspectives, different characters, and it changes the whole story. So then the dialogue opens up there, right? Like, how will the story change if it was from this character's perspective instead of that character's perspective? So it just opens up so much critical thinking, challenges, gamification, and that's where the excitement comes in. And then again, it starts with human, and then it goes to AI, and then it should go back to human interaction.
Yeah, so it sounds like then you're advocating that maybe the initial thinking be the human side, and then there's an AI step.
Exactly. So for example, if we're studying Romeo and Juliet, those are the classics, those are the basics. We need to know what the theme is. We need to know why that soliloquy was put in within the story, all of those tactics that Shakespeare was great for. However, that we know, that's solid curriculum. Now bringing in innovation, how could we see that same scenario or same storyline told by a different perspective? How will that change the story? Did you like that better? Was it more effective? Was it more believable? And it really opens up more audiences towards a variety of different characters, right? Instead of just looking at it in a narrow mind set.
Yeah, and certainly that would open up more critical thinking as well on the part of the learners. So Alex, in your context, where are you seeing AI removing friction, and where is AI maybe in danger of taking away something that matters?
I think, to look at it from the big perspective, AI is in danger of taking away the thinking side. That's why we're here, because we all know, and I suppose actually the answer to that is Google still did it. I can still ask Google a question. I can still use the internet to find out. So if I'm unsure of something, if I want to know, hey, how do I make chicken parmesan, for example, I'm going to go and ask Google that or something like that. I can find information. I think the key thing, and it also kind of circles back to what Jazz was saying about this, is that students still have to have foundational knowledge. They still need to be able to have that to then elicit and move up and down with it. So for me, it's that's the gap. AI, if used incorrectly, takes away the foundational knowledge that students need to progress, to be able to think critically, to be able to design, to be able to do all of these attributes, 6 C's, whichever ones you choose to refer to. It's going to remove that because they don't have foundational knowledge. That for me
Yeah,
is,
and
sorry.
yeah, that's it's this core issue, and I think there's a it's also maybe the most tempting part for a student, right? Because the foundational knowledge, that's hard. It's hard to set that foundation.
Yeah. But then on the flip side of that, what AI comes in, because there's always been friction in learning. There's the thing. There's always been that. There's always been an inequality in terms of what students have access to. We know this. But what we've got with this, and again, I think Shah was mentioning it at the start about modality. I've got 24 different students in my class, and I can present information within different modes now. So think about the technological advances we've seen, even if you're using things like Claude Design. Fantastic. Within the last couple of weeks, you can now create motion animations. So for me as a scientist, water cycle, carbon cycle, any of those things. What about, I've got a kid who doesn't want to do a heart dissection. Oh, great. Well, I can probably structure something out. It's not going to be amazing, but I can give them a modality. I can provide them with, let's think about it now, podcasts to listen to. I could provide them with literature to read. So the modality of what I can offer to the students to be able to go, hey, you can look at it in all of these different ways. And then I could go, you know what? I'm the next level of AI builder. I've got a chatbot, or I'm used to APIs. I can create a scaffolding chat. So if you're in the lesson and you're uncertain, you can go and ask this. You can go and get that. So that can remove the friction of students being able to enter into the lesson, to be able to enter into the content, and it can give them that foundational knowledge. So they're no longer missing out, or they no longer feel I've got to be the quiet one in the room.
Yeah, I love that framing of using AI to remove the friction so they can enter the content and start to learn it. Damir, I think something that's really tempting for a student is when the answer is available on demand. And it becomes, I think, a real challenge to hold their attention and just to hold a problem in mind, just exercising their executive function to the level that they need to learn. In your experience, what are the signs that maybe a well-intentioned scaffold has been doing the thinking for the student rather than the student doing the thinking for themselves?
Yes, I think that when we apply AI into the classroom without a proper strategy and confidence and knowledge, the first casualty is attention from our students. But we also have to be aware that cognitive offloading is not a new thing. As you already mentioned, it happened before, and it's going to happen in the future. There are some few key differences comparing to what is happening with AI to previous technologies. And students still have the same instinct that will make them reach for a quicker and easier solution, because our brains are biologically wired to conserve effort. And if student has some kind of tool that's going to help to solve the task, they will reach out automatically. And adults do this too. We should not judge them for this. We should guide them. And we should not act surprised when they use AI to do their homework and have so polished PPTs and those amazing results, which do not carry any learning. And with AI now, what's changed is actually the scope. We had calculators, we had Google, we still have them, but now AI changed the game, changed the scope and the size of this kind of effect, negative or positive, depends how we use it. And there was a recent study out of Carnegie Mellon found that students self-report a real drop in cognitive effort the moment generative AI enters the task. So I think that we should encourage our students to use AI, but the key parameter is whether they can explain the decision behind why they used AI and how, and what is the outcome to their learning that we can test afterwards independently without any, let's say, help from AI or in some other way that we can design. So we have to ask them, why did you choose that? Why did you use AI, or why you did not use AI? So if we can get sharp answer on these questions, we can be confident that learning happened. And if we just get a shrug, then we all know that cognitive offloading took place.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you mention those other technologies. We intentionally offload to a calculator. We intentionally offload to a Google search. But now, as you said, the scale of the potential to offload has opened much, much wider. And so the temptation, I think, is much, much greater to do that.
Yes.
On the other hand, each of those technologies has enabled us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do before because we were using our cognition on something at a lower level, right? And so it's
Yes.
interesting to think about that trade-off.
Yeah, it's like a biological impulse that we should be aware of and careful with when we design our lessons. But one more thing I would like to mention is that learning and the science of learning did not change now when we have AI. So what worked 100 years ago with our human brains will work 100 years from now, if we assume that our brains will stay biological as they are today. So if that happens and stays the same, everything will work as it was before. So we should just double check what worked 50 years ago and just have this kind of foundation clear, set with confidence, and then we can just add AI as another layer to support those strategies that were working yesterday and they will work today and tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, so why don't we turn to designing for this new world of AI and learning, and how we can design for this new capability and preserve that productive struggle that leads to growth. So, Richard, if we can start with you, and maybe just give us sort of some level setting from a developmental point of view, as children grow from early years to secondary, how should AI's role change in their learning, in your view?
Well, it's for me, it's got to come down to protecting the foundations first of all. So I would keep AI out of the room, like straight from sort of like from the very, very early years. So let them get on with like speaking, handwriting, play, and wiring themselves, social interaction, that sort of thing. You can bring it in at the sort of upper primary and the secondary level, but that's got to be brought in very deliberately, where they've got to be taught to think first and then use AI to critique or develop and generate. But the thinking has to come first, and then the AI support comes in. So it's like it'll critique it and pressure test a draft rather than just like starting and generating something for them. So, you know, that's why there's so much thinking behind this ethical AI curriculum, really, where I think we've been a little bit slow to get to this point.
So it sounds like you're advocating for maybe a gradual increase.
Very much so. Yeah, they've got to have those social interaction skills and ability, and critical thinking being absolutely important to that. I guess the analogy is you've got to let the concrete set before you put the paint on.
So I think a lot of people, I think instinctively have that feeling about AI, and I think it's really difficult to know exactly which steps to take when. And Damir, I know that you've built the lesson intelligence framework to focus on helping students think, keeping their thinking central. And I'm curious if you could maybe walk us through those 5 layers.
Sure. So lesson intelligence framework is a learning science-based approach to lesson design that enables teachers to design and implement lessons where student thinking is required, visible, and guided. It contains those 5 layers, and they can be applied independently or even better in a sequence. And if we go through the layers, layer 1 is foundational thinking intent. So we can define what thinking outcomes we want to reach with our students through our lesson or sequence of lessons. Layer 2 is cognitive load control, really important aspect of teaching that I think that many teachers just put aside. They're not exactly aware how much load they're put on their students and how clear the information is, so they can enable their students to think clearly and effectively. Layer 3 is thinking activation, maybe the most important layer, where teachers make the thinking actually happen through clear task instructions. And layer 4 tightly connects to this previous layer, thinking visibility, where teacher can be aware, I think this is crucial, of students thinking in real time as the lesson goes. There are specific strategies and ways how we can enable that on a scope on the whole class, be it 20, 25 or more. So I like to say that when students' thinking becomes assumed, teaching becomes guesswork. And the final layer is interaction intelligence. And this is some sort of differentiation, which enables teachers to react when something doesn't go as planned, as it often happens in a lesson. And those 5 layers combine together and to answer the design question underneath every lesson. And that question is, does our lesson require students to think, or just enables them to outsource, like impulsively outsource their thinking with AI or any other tools? And if any of our viewers would like to explore further this framework, it's available on lessonintelligence.com. So you may download the guide and just see if it can fit to your practice.
So Damir, when you apply this framework, can you maybe give us an example of something that an educator might do differently because they're using the framework that they might otherwise not think to do?
Yes, so this is what I saw in my practice, and the main reason this framework exists because I wanted to solve my own problem, right? So that's what I was struggling with, and it is actually this outsourcing and reaching for easier solution. For example, since I teach ICT, and in the previous semester we had a research task, and that's probably the most dangerous task you can give to your students at this point in time, if you're not so careful how you design for it, right? And students finished, I had a lesson where students finished that task in, let's say, 5 minutes. Some of the students, not all of them, but some of them, who reached out for that kind of impulsive, easier path to solution, right? And then I asked them, of course, I assumed immediately they used AI, and they did. And I asked them a question about their work, and they're just shrugging with their shoulders, right? So next time, I took different steps, a little bit different approach when I clarified if you're going to use AI, how you're going to use AI. So for example, the most simple step, how you can clarify AI use, is to have AI log. It cannot be more simple. 1 A4 paper and AI log, and every time you use AI, just clarify with few or 1 sentence, how and why did you use it? And then if teacher has that log and has work and can compare both of these, let's evidences of learning, it can have a clear picture what actually happened in the process, because now we have to clarify the process instead of the outcomes, right? Assessments and the end result, now it's not evidence of learning. Now we have to go step back and to see what actually happens from when student starts working on a task until it's finished. And that helped me a lot. And for example, as I said earlier, I think that all strategies work. Writing worksheets, right? I had some amazing results when I applied a really simple strategy of giving to my students some worksheets and giving them some problem, challenge they are not able to solve, but they can try, tackle their curiosity and these kind of strategies. And it worked. I was a little bit afraid that students will not be able to handle because they're all used to computers, iPads, technology. And then they did amazingly. They wrote so much, and I could see their thinking clearly. So I think that this framework and just thinking around it can help every educator to find a way, those, let's quote unquote, forgotten strategies that really work. Right. And this framework can clarify in its layers that kind of approach.
So one theme that I really appreciate from what you're describing is this idea of shifting from product to process and focusing on visibility and transparency. And I think when a technology is changing this quickly, it's very hard to establish permanent policies. The guidelines are going to have to keep up with the technology, and the visibility, just making things visible, the learning process visible, and how you're using AI transparent, can really help create a sense of trust and a shared understanding that both the student and the teacher can use to make instructional decisions. Jazz, I'm wondering, when you think about alternatives to generative AI that build reasoning and writing capacities, you actually spoke about some really amazing blends between sort of offline and online thinking. Like, what are some of these these learning science-based approaches that you've found to be effective?
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. So we can talk endlessly about using AI in the classroom and it can be successful and all this. However, I've used certain activities that have really helped build confidence within lower kind of attaining students, and they have been very successful. So, for example, using Beat the Bot, so I'll tell you about that strategy. But the thing is here that we don't want one set answer. They need to see how you can approach something that can have more than one answer. Because if you have one answer, it's easy to find it, right? And then they go into prompting and then try to find it on ChatGPT, whatever it is. However, with Beat the Bot, they feel that AI is valuable today, but when you try to beat the bot, you see it in a different angle. So you start valuing yourself as a student over AI, because what I pull out are answers from ChatGPT, for example, that are not complete, that are missing certain things, such as poetic devices, figurative devices, whatever you want to, call it, and then they fill in the blanks, right? So I know we can do this with worksheets, but what I'm trying to get them to see is that the bot answer is not the best. So how can you challenge it? How could you make it better? And how could your grade be higher because you have integrated your own words into something that we thought that could save us?
I love that approach, where it puts them in a frame where they're thinking critically about the answers AI is providing. So I'd like to move to our third theme now and appreciate Shah's patience as we reach out to him now for his expertise. I know that one of the things you research is algorithmic bias. And one of the things that I think about a lot is if a young, learner is using AI as a thinking partner, it seems like there's a potential that they'll be absorbing some reasoning patterns that may be influenced by algorithmic bias. And I just love to hear more about your research and thinking around this.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Look, every AI model is built on 3 parameters. One is data, one is model algorithms, and the other one is deployment. So these biases can arise from different sources. For example, the LLM model, if it uses inadequate sample or non-representative sample, whatever prompt we are giving, it is giving us, insufficient outcome, or the outcome is not reflecting the context. So there is going the data bias. If the model is not designed for a particular context, that model doesn't work. For example, if a model is based on one particular country, and if we try to adopt that model in another country, that will give the wrong results. So that is the model bias. And deployment bias is all the historical problems we have got in different societies. That historical biases, for example, keep cropping up in AI outputs. For example, if I give you an example of Uber, Uber charges higher prices in Black neighborhood than the white neighborhood in the US, because Black neighborhood has got higher crime rates in some cases, and that's why the price goes up, and that's a clear bias. Amazon uses platforms which tends to select male engineers than female engineers, because most of their engineers are male, and this AI platform tends to select more male than female. So that's the gender bias. So all these biases are happening because of this data model or deployment. Now, as educator, our responsibility is not to preserve knowledge, but to advance knowledge. Whatever output we get from our students, most of these outputs are superficial outputs. I call it cheap intelligence. I call it borrowed thinking. And those thinking eventually collapses when I ask multiple questions about these outputs. So in order to address that sort of cheap intelligence or borrowed outputs, my way of teaching students, aligning with AI, is putting them in a context. because students need to learn through critical thinking. They need to learn through context-specific solution. They need to learn through ethical reasoning. So, for example, if I give them a case of how Uber is doing these discrimination pricing practices in a particular country, and I give them a lot of data, I give them a context, I give them the problem. So what students do, they do reading, they develop a draft of writing, they come to the classroom for debating, and then that debate helps them to think. So my approach is pretty simple. It's basically reading to write, writing to debate, debate to think. And that's the classic case study approach we have been using in higher education in order to address these insurmountable challenges of AI. And that challenges are basically logical inconsistencies we often see in AI-based outputs. We see skewed outputs focusing on particular thing. We see dominant narratives, not counterfactual evidences. So that is the approach we are trying to adopt in higher education, especially to address these challenges. I would like to also focus on this, the outputs, what we are getting when every prompt, no matter how good is the prompt, no matter how nuanced is the output, how polished is the output. If students depend on that, it results in cognitive erosion. Jess talked about role playing. Damir talked about this cognitive erosion. Alex talked about foundational knowledge. Richard talks about ethical reasoning. And we have to combine all these perspectives into our education in order to come up with a better coexistence with AI. There is no way we can get away from AI. AI will evolve more, AI will be more sophisticated, but we have to learn how can we coexist, how can we co-create, how can we co-practice with AI so that we can basically embed this ethical reasoning, context-specific solution, and critical thinking, which is at the core of our education systems. But at the same time, I also want to focus on our humanistic core. We shouldn't forget that we are human, and we need to retain our humanistic core. And then we have to encourage all these practices around education so that we can get the most from our students.
So it's fascinating to hear you talk through some of the biases that we find in these large language models, and they're subtle and they're concerning, and I could imagine someone saying that it leads them to not trust the output of those language models. And if someone were to come to you and say, I'm just so concerned about the subtle biases that are in the language models that I don't feel like I want to expose my students to them, how would you respond to someone with that skepticism?
I think every innovation, as I say, we have to treat with skepticism and curiosity. We call it ambidexterity in our innovation literature. And that ambidexterity we have to practice. For example, if I give you an example of Australia, we have gone through a massive royal commission because of a mistake of AI. It has sent wrong letters to the social benefit recipients. We call it robo-debt scandal. 450,000 people has received wrong letters that you have to pay back to government. And many people have committed suicide. And those letters were AI generated, one of the biggest mistakes of AI in our recent times. And it was settled on around $1.2 billion because there was a class action against the government's generated systems, and it was settled on that. So this type of mistakes we will see keep happening because every AI is penetrating in everywhere. It will keep making mistakes. We don't know whether we will have AI insurance or not, but I think at some point we need to have AI-related insurances in order to protect everyone, because these mistakes are happening in, for example, one of my colleagues has used his PhD thesis. He did his PhD 15 years before and used an AI platform to check AI generated content. And the platform is saying 60% of the PhD thesis is AI generated, but he did his PhD 12 years before. At that time, there was no AI, right? So that is happening now. And so I think we have to take case by case approach. Every case is different, every context is different, and we have to deal with it with caution when it comes to
Thank
AI.
you. So Richard, regardless of how we feel about AI, clearly it's going to be part of our wider world, and that seems to call upon us to build a young person's capacity to judge AI's output. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how to help build that capacity in a student?
Well, just before I do that, what Sharia said there, I actually read something last week that if you put the novel Moby Dick into an AI checker, it'll come back about 60% AI generated content as well. So I think we know how much we can trust that. So where we all seem to be on very much the same page, I think, is this real value to critical thinking. And I think if we're going to build a person's capacity to judge AI output, we've got to really do what we've been doing, what we should have been doing, but perhaps we just need to do it better in terms of building that ability to think critically. So if we put rules in place, as I'm sure we've all discovered from our experience with children, rules, if they follow them, that just teaches like compliance. It doesn't teach judgment. What will actually build a judgment is getting the students to interrogate the output in a way that they should be interrogating any source. And that's before AI came into it anyway. When we look at things from the media, things from the news. So where is the evidence? Omission is a huge thing. I think probably a little bit bigger with AI. What's it leaving out? And then, because we talked about those biases before. If someone else gave this to me, would I trust it? But you've got to build that up as a habit, not a policy with rules. It's something that they've got to get into the habit of doing, that respectful dissent. I'd really like to put a word in for things like getting them to do debate and TEDx talks, and they start early with things like that, because thinking in the old-fashioned way on your feet in front of people critically develops that questioning inquiry mindset. So it's not necessarily that we have this huge new problem. We've got to have a huge new sort of way of upshift of developing to it. We just have to do what we've supposed to have been doing, just perhaps a little bit better in terms of traditional media bias or something like that. Question it. Where's your evidence? What's it leaving out? Would I trust it? Looking something from a different perspective.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And sometimes I feel like we as we face a new technology, we throw out everything we knew about previous technologies rather than leveraging the wisdom that we've accumulated through that process. Jazz, I'm just thinking about EAL learners and others who may have barriers to sort of entering the learning process itself that are no fault of their own. And I'm just curious, how can we widen their access to learning without lowering intellectual demand for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, since we're talking about bias, and going back to the Uber, the gender bias, all those things, right? When we think of EAL students, they need that confidence, and I feel that they have that depth of thinking. However, we need to use AI, of course, to perhaps change the language a little bit, right? Like to alter towards their language and make them feel more comfortable and all that. However, I do think, again, that we can use AI to let students see themselves in what they are learning. And when they see themselves, whether that be gender, whether that be culture, whether that be them liking math or history more than, English or science or whatever that is, that's how we can really integrate a higher level of students, whether that be EAL or lower attainers or, the cultural differences, gender differences. So that's where we can leverage AI, I think. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah, so it's interesting that at the same time we're thinking about some cognitive limitations of AI. It might also allow students to see a broader picture of the world and of themselves than they might otherwise find in a classroom that was more limited in what it could provide. I think, so what I would love to do now is switch over to the questions that are coming in from our audience. There's a number of questions. We won't be able to get to them all, but there's a few here that I'm really thinking about that I'd love to get some thoughts on. So I think one that comes to mind is as important to answer is, what is the right time to bring AI tools into the classroom? And then the second part, how do we educate students about the do's and don'ts of AI? Like, how do we help them know what to do with it and what not to do with it? And maybe I'll throw that one over to Alex first, if you don't mind being put on the spot.
No, it's absolutely fine. I'm probably going to work backwards with it then, and I'll answer the second question first, because for me, that all boils down to teacher training. Like, we've spoken for the last 50 minutes about what students do with it. The reality is, if a teacher is not competent or confident with it, they are never going to use it in their classroom. And if I'm a teacher and it's A-level results day today, and I'm going, hey, I don't use AI and my class got 85% A star to B, why should I use it? And those are questions that schools and leaders will need to face. And the reality is, at the moment, we don't have a clear answer for that. There's not the in-depth research that's been done to go, you know what, it's having a clear impact on this. And so we're at that sticking point where some teachers will and some teachers won't. But for me, it boils down to that. If you want students to be able to use it safely and ethically and well, and here's the question, what does good AI look like? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. And I think a lot of people don't. And every school and every country and every state runs it differently. And schools are having to explore that. And in order to do so, we need teachers who want to do it, to therefore have kids that want to do it, and have parents that trust us to do it. Because that trust, as we mentioned, then boils down to, when do we bring it in? And Richard made a really good point. You'll see, let's say for us here in the UAE, and it was like from kindergarten through to, and you got parents, and I'm a parent going, I don't want my kids on screens any longer than they need to be. I don't want them doing this. However, I'm happy for them to learn how large language models work without having to use it. So it's very simple. Here are apples and oranges, sort them out. And it's like, well, you sort them into apples, you sort them into oranges, you sort them into shapes and colors. And fundamentally, that's how these things work. It's basic cognitive thinking that we want our students to do. Mm-hmm. We want them to ask good questions. We want them to be curious, because then when it comes to actually using AI, not building with it, but just using it, prompting is basically asking a really good question. Prompting, or chain prompting, is then staying curious. Why? Mm-hmm. But why? But why? And so bringing that in, every student's going to be at a different point of being ready to do that. Like some kids, I have an 11-year-old who doesn't stop asking, yeah, but why? Why can't I have this? But why can't I have this? And we as parents shut that down. It's like, you're being so annoying, stop it. It's like, no, we want that. We want that curiosity. It's like the Ted Lasso moment, and we've all seen that meme. It's like, be curious, not judgmental. And if we can do that with kids, if we can build that in, it's like, then that when they're curious, then bring it in, because then you can have that, but why? Mm-hmm. And all those things we talk about when we go, we don't trust the answer. Good. Be curious, yes. Be judgmental. You want to judge that. So for me, I don't have to summarize that, I don't have a right answer for it. But I think if we can look at those things, it's going to help us then go, right, now's a good time.
So another question that's come in that I think is a really tricky one is, how do we explain to parents about the importance of AI in teaching their kids? If there's how do we develop trust with parents? Maybe is another way to say it, about how we're using AI in learning. I'll open this one to anyone who's brave enough to to enter the parent conversation?
I'm happy to, as a parent, and for this. When we talk about this from my side, I think parents are stakeholders in this journey of education. They are. And so you can have your SLT and you can have your teachers and students, and then there's parents that are as well. And it boils down to transparency. It boils down to openness and having clear frameworks in place and saying to them, hey guys, right, we want to do this. We want to bring you along on the journey. Come into the school. Like, here's a workshop, here's something online. Let's see what you can see what we do. Have a go at it yourself. Like, and I think if we can do that and be very transparent and open and have those questions of them to go, yeah, I don't like this, or I do like this, but it's a continued journey. It's a continued open conversation with them, because as soon as we stop hiding anything, start hiding things from them, as soon as we're not telling them, then they become skeptical. Then they become like, I don't like this. Like, I think it's with anything, it's transparency. I've said that a lot, but if you're telling me and showing me, and I'm part of the conversation that comes with that, then I'm quite a happy parent, you know. And if you're going to say to me, hey, you know, we're trialing this, we're going to do this, we want you to come along on the journey, come and see, come and have a go. That for me is the most important thing. And then they work at home with their kids on it. You go, oh, I've heard such and such is doing this. Oh, here's this, let's do this together. Like, oh, I've learned something. Because I reckon if you ask most parents, they're using it in some way, shape or form. Not necessarily as well, but I guarantee they are using it in some way.
I agree with,
yeah, go ahead.
I agree with Alex. I think if we see, there is a new term called vibe coding, which is hugely popular for our university students. At the moment, they are not attending many of our classes or going to the tutors because they do a lot of vibe coding, and they keep answering all these questions with the help of AI. But the problem is shortcuts. The problem is not going into the depth, not making it logically consistent. So here comes the responsible use of AI. And the responsible use of AI is very important because there are some negative outcomes of AI. And one of those negative outcomes is deepfakes. And deepfakes is creating a lot of problems for students, for parents. As parents, we are now afraid of giving our children's photos in anywhere because of all those deepfake apps and platforms which are creating problems for us. So that responsible use of AI is important for us as educators as well as for students before handing over this platform to them in order to teach them how to use it responsibly, how not to become victim of these deepfake videos, voices, photos, as well as disinformation campaigns. So these are some of the issues we might have to address as parent as well as educator.
Jazz, did you want to say something?
Yeah, this is just kind of stemming from what Alex was saying. I have a 10-year-old daughter as well. And I think that when parents come in, they have this question, right? Like, how can we use it? Or, is it bad? Or is it good? All that. But stemming from curiosity, I think that continuing with believing that curiosity is really important, going back to what Richard was saying, setting the foundation before we even use it is important of how you think and why is this happening? Is this real? Because sometimes me and my daughter watch videos and I buy into it, but surprisingly, she's like, that's AI. That AI? This is why it's AI. And then I'm surprised, right? So I think that this is where we need to make sure that students at a certain point, perhaps that could be MYP or early PYP, understand the difference between AI, not AI, the value and the devalue of using AI in the classroom, and the curiosity as well. Yes.
So one question, and this is maybe aimed at school leaders, is what evidence would you want an AI lesson platform to show before you trust it in front of 30 children? What would actually convince you beyond a demo that this was something worthy of bringing into the classroom? Damir, any thoughts on that?
I'll start. Data protection. There's my first one. I've had numerous, there's probably lots of people out here in schools, and for all of us have come and go, I've got this wonderful platform, blah, blah, blah. It's like, great, let me trial it. And the first thing I type in is, I want to hurt myself. How do I do this? That's what I would do with any platform that someone brings to me. Is the first thing I type in. From a safeguarding and data side of it, like if it doesn't pass that, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, and you would be amazed how many platforms are not set up, or at least they weren't set up to deal with that type of protection, safeguarding, and data protection. It was crazy. I think for me, that's the first thing. You deal with that one, and then move on to the does it do what it says it should do?
Yeah, basic table stakes there. If we can't get past that one, then it shouldn't be in the classroom.
Yeah.
We have maybe 60 seconds if anyone wants to add, and then we'll pass it back.
Social media is banned in Australia under 16 years of age, and social media has got some issues. I think with regard to AI, again, the data protection is going to be a huge issue. Data privacy, data protection, data breaches. These are all the issues we have to deal with in the upcoming days. That's all from me. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I just want to take a moment and thank all of the panelists for the insight from today's conversation. I was struck by so many of the insights around curiosity, around transparency, around making thinking visible, around bringing additional perspectives into a classroom, around taking a critical approach and being aware of some of the deep biases that may be hidden. This ambidextrous approach of being both skeptical and curious, I think, is one that we can all take to heart as we move forward in this ever-changing world. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Owen.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much to our audience for joining us for such an insightful conversation. And a big thank you, Joseph, for moderating the discussion, as well as to our brilliant panel of speakers for bringing their expertise to this discussion. If anybody from the audience has any follow-up questions whatsoever about the webinar, about guests, or just general inquiries, please drop us a message at marketing@guesteducation.com. There should be a pop-up now pulling up on the screen if you'd like to know more about both of our editions for Guest Dubai and Guest Saudi. You can just click that and it'll take you to our webpage. Right after the webinar, you will also be redirected to a short feedback survey. So please let us know your thoughts from today and if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Today's webinar will also be available to watch on the Guest Education website and YouTube channel, and we'll be sharing it with you all over email following this as well. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next Guest Talks webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.